Now, the former U.S. President Donald Trump has returned to his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida after pleading not guilty to 34 criminal charges in a New York court. Mr. Trump is accused of falsifying records and paying hush money to hide damaging information during the 2016 presidential election. It's the first time a former or sitting president has ever been charged with a crime. During a speech to supporters, he said his only crime was to fearlessly defend the nation from those who would destroy it. Mr. Trump repeated the false claim that he'd been cheated out of office in 2020 by voter fraud.
We have to save our country. God bless you all. God bless you all. And I never thought anything like this could happen in America. Never thought it could happen. The only crime that I have committed is to fearlessly defend our nation from those who seek to destroy it. This fake case was brought only to interfere with the upcoming 2024 election, and it should be dropped immediately. Our elections were like those of a third world country, and now this massive election interference at a scale never seen before in our country, beginning with the radical left, George Soros-backed prosecutor Alvin Bragg of New York, who campaigned on the fact that he would get President Trump. I'm going to get him. This is a guy campaigning. He wanted to get President Trump at any cost, and this before he knew anything about me, didn't know a thing about me. He was campaigning. As it turns out, virtually everybody that has looked at this case, including rhinos and even hardcore Democrats, say there is no crime and that it should never have been brought.
Donald Trump. Now, some leading Republicans have criticized the legal action. The House Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, accused prosecutors of interfering in the democratic process. Senator Mitt Romney, an often harsh critic of Mr. Trump, said the prosecutors' overreach had set a dangerous precedent. But the Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, laid out his case in a press conference after Mr. Trump's court appearance, saying no one was above the law.
Today, uphold our solemn responsibility to ensure that everyone stands equal before the law. No amount of money and no amount of power changes that enduring American principle. 34 false statements made to cover up other crimes. These are felony crimes in New York State, no matter who you are. We cannot and will not normalize serious criminal conduct. The defendant repeatedly made false statements on New York business records. He also caused others to make false statements. The defendant claimed that he was paying Michael Cohen for legal services performed in 2017. This simply was not true. And it was a false statement that the defendant made month after month in 2017. April, May, June, and so on through the rest of the year.
Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg there. Now, Donald Trump's legal team will have until August to file any motions against the case. The next court hearing is set for December. His supporters believe the case will only make him stronger as he aims to secure the Republican nomination for the next U.S. election in 2024.
We're going to make him stronger. He's a fighter. And now the MAGA movement, I think, also just got more energized.
The thing is if you thought that Trump's base could not get bigger, well, they just made it bigger. All they did, they helped him. They didn't hurt him. As usual, they helped him. They have not been able to get anything on him because we've done it.
Well, for more on this, let's cross live to Washington and speak with Arise U.S. correspondent Eric Ham. Good to see you. Erica, help us gauge reactions in the U.S. to that Trump rally and following those unprecedented criminal charges brought against the former president.
Well, Charles, it's been a mixed reaction regarding Donald Trump's comments that he made in the wake of that indictment that was unfurled yesterday. Many saw Donald Trump's comments as someone who came across as desperate, someone who was still sulking from his 2020 loss, and also someone who believes that, who also spoke presciently about where not the charges in Manhattan are likely to go, but those looming investigations in Georgia and at the federal level in terms of how he spoke about them. In fact, Charles, well, when you listen to his comments yesterday, while he certainly is deeply unhappy with these charges that he is facing in New York, it seems as though the charges that Jack Smith could potentially bring, as well as the charges that Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis could bring, are charges that certainly are far more serious, but more importantly, are increasingly more black and white in terms of the evidence that those two investigators have compiled. And Donald Trump seems to be deeply worried about that. And here's where this gets interesting. Donald Trump, even amid the charges that he is facing in Manhattan, if he is convicted or even while he is still undergoing a criminal proceeding, can run for president, and if he is elected, can actually serve as president. However, in the case of what is being investigated by Jack Smith, the special prosecutor for the Department of Justice, that is looking specifically at Donald Trump's role in that 2021 insurrection. And based on the U.S. Federal Penal Code, if in fact Jack Smith can prove that Donald Trump implemented, fomented an insurrection, that automatically nullifies and makes him unable to actually run or serve for president because of his role in inciting an insurrection. And so that could pose not only problems for Donald Trump's political career, but also his livelihood.
Yes, and you talked about him appearing to be worried. Some have suggested that his demeanor during that speech at his rally seemed downbeat, not the usual sort of, controlling the narrative and ready to take on the campaign look. But a lot of pushback, Eric, from Republicans and Trump supporters, criticizing prosecutors for upgrading misdemeanors to felonies and talking about a malicious prosecution.
Charles, I'm glad you brought that up because we have heard from our sources on Capitol Hill, and Donald Trump's team is effectively and aggressively working all of the leadership of the Republican Party to make sure that they are not only behind Donald Trump, but that they're also aggressively going after this Manhattan district attorney for this case. In fact, we heard from the second in command in the U.S. Senate on the Republican side, who has now come out and said that he believes that this was a politically motivated endeavor by the Manhattan district attorney. And so what we're seeing here is a pile on by Republicans who are not only calling out the district attorney, but also are saying that there needs to be congressional investigations into how this case came about. And what we're seeing here is Donald Trump is effectively pushing all the buttons within the Republican Party to ensure that he is insulated and that even those that are attempting to run against him for the nomination are doing his bidding in terms of actually going after the DA to insulate him from these potential charges.
And Eric, we've got less than a minute or so. If I might get your assessment of this other story, Taiwan's president meeting the U.S. House Speaker during a stopover in LA in the coming hours. That's not going to help relations with China, is it?
No, not at all. In fact, we know that meeting is currently underway. In fact, they're meeting at the Ronald Reagan Library or currently in California. We saw the two leaders actually shake hands and come together. Now, we know that Kevin McCarthy initially wanted to meet with the Taiwanese president in Taiwan. So this seems to have actually been a negotiated settlement, but still it has caused some unhappy feelings in China. But nevertheless, what we're seeing is that the United States, even though the tensions between the U.S. and China are at an all-time high, the two sides at least are attempting to try to keep the lines of communication open.
Eric, thanks very much indeed. And I want to say thank you for your brilliant coverage yesterday when all this was unfolding with Donald Trump in Lower Manhattan. I expect you're back in Washington now. Eric Ham, Arise US correspondent.